Hey everybody, and welcome to Workout Wednesday. We are covering some accessory lifts today, and accessory means that it is the secondary movement to your primary movement. So think your squat, your bench, your deadlift, your clean and jerk, your snatch. In the lifting world, those are your compound lifts, your main lifts. Your accessory lifts support them. So if we are continuing on our trend of posterior chain engagement, following on after our deadlift videos, we are working on the Romanian deadlift, or an RDL. The purpose of an RDL is to increase strength and hypertrophy, or size, muscle mass, toning, whatever you want to call it, to your hamstrings, your glutes, your entire posterior chain. The issue is the RDL is sometimes overcomplicated and it's underutilized. So today, we're going to go over how to do an RDL, variations of your RDL, and then how to add this into your everyday lifting routine. Okay, so coming back to our favorite box and kettlebell setup, reinforcing good positioning is always important. So as a reminder, before you set up your RDL, it's a hinge movement. We're not leaning forward and rounding our back, we are hinging. So your feet will get up underneath your shoulders or closer, toes 45 degrees out. Placing our hands near our hips, we are pushing the hips back, allowing the hands to stay in a straight line, flexing the glutes, coming through, and up. This position is all that you're looking for your RDL. This is not about range of motion. Can you touch the floor for an RDL? Yes. Do you need to? No. As soon as you feel contraction or tightness through the hamstrings and the glutes, that is when you are coming up from the bottom of your RDL. For those of us who are hyper mobile, someone like myself, you can typically overload this by using a heavier kettlebell and being very controlled with your movements. So if we were to move the box and do this, you would see that I am only extending kettlebell in hand until about my knees, and then I flex up slow and controlled. If you are one of those people who just don't feel it in your hamstrings, you are likely rolling your pelvis underneath of you, like so, and then rolling your back. Make sure our hips are back, pushing back, bow and arrow metaphor, or booty bumping the door when you have too many groceries in your hands. Make sure your hips lead first, pulling back. All right, guys, so once you have warmed up or you are an absolute pro with this movement and you no longer need your box to help assist, you can now move straight to the kettlebell or dumbbell variation. It is the same hinge pattern. We are setting up. You want to start with your RDL if you're using a kettlebell or a dumbbell in between your feet. You don't want it too far forward because then you're reaching and rounding. We want to keep everything as in line as possible. So hands will come to the front, shooting our hips back. You'll pick up the kettlebell, and from the top, we are hinging over, squeezing up. From the side, we are hinging, squeezing up. Notice, can I go all the way to the floor? Yes, but at that point, you are probably engaging your lower back, and 99.9% of you probably don't have the control to go to that range of motion without injuring yourself. So please, as soon as you feel contraction in your hamstrings, come back up to the top. So just for reference, we are hinging back, weight is in the mid of our foot, shoulders stay back, pulling them back, pushing through the hips, feeling the lengthening in the hamstrings, come forward, and so on and so forth. Once you've done this movement for 3 sets of 10 and you feel very comfortable with it, you don't feel anything in your lower back, now we can move into variations that will increase how much tension you feel through the movement. Variation number 1 is the staggered RDL. I prefer the staggered RDL to the single leg RDL because, again, being hypermobile, I can pop my right hip out of the socket at will. The moment I go to a single leg movement, my hips like to rotate because I'm not very stable through my hips. If you are one of those people, I want you to use a staggered RDL, not the single leg RDL. Yes, the single leg RDL looks pretty. That doesn't mean it's the right movement for you. So for a staggered RDL, you are simply gonna take whichever foot you wanna start with, 1 step forward. It is very important that through your staggered RDL, your hips stay centered. We don't want you twisting or twisting, hips forward. You will pick up your kettlebell or dumbbell, whichever you prefer. Both knees are bent, and all you're doing is pushing your hips back, leaning over that front leg. As soon as you feel contractions in the hamstring, shoot through. Lean over that front leg, shoot through. And once you've done however many reps you've decided to do for the day, 8, 10, 20, 30, switch legs. You are going to notice that you're probably gonna feel more balanced on one than the other. That's okay, we're bipedal. We typically have some imbalances right to left. And this is why we segment things one leg to the next and not always doing both at the same time. We want to work on any imbalances you have to make sure that you are as well-rounded as possible for your athletic endeavors. So once you switch your leg, same thing, make sure your hips are squared off and forward, pushing over that front leg, keeping both knees bent and up. Now notice, you do not need to lock this out all the way at the top. I am hinging forward, coming up, hinging forward, coming up. The moment I lock out, I am taking the movement out of my hamstrings and out of my glutes and centering it in my lower back. You do not need to lock out every single movement for every single exercise that you do. So whether you are doing a goblet squat, if you're doing a Bulgarian split squat, whatever you're doing, if you can keep the contraction and the tightness in the muscle you're looking to work, you're going to push more blood through the fascia, you're going to increase hypertrophy, you're going to get a better pump, as the pros call it. So once you've mastered the staggered RDL, you can now maybe swim into the single leg world. Again, single legs are not my favorite. So if you want to practice this, find a rack, something to hold on to, and you can really start this by just working on touching your toe, one at a time. Without the kettlebell, hinging over, taking one hand, coming down and up, down and up. Notice you have to keep your balance centered. This is why I don't like single leg RDLs for beginners or for people who are intermediate or who work in multiple sports. If you are on the MMA side and you're on the boot camp side and you're doing gym time, let's work on some stability first. Range of motion is great, but that is not the most important thing in your lifting routine. So to recap, the RDL strengthens hamstrings, glutes, tendons, ligaments, everything that you need to help support your deadlift or your other movements, especially if you're looking for explosive movements or an increase in speed, the RDL is your friend. Make sure your knees are bent, make sure your hips are forward, and whether you choose to do a regular RDL, which is coming forward, or staggering it out, the most important thing is that you're feeling it through your hamstrings, feeling it through your glutes, and start with an appropriate weight. Don't get excited and reach for the 97-pound kettlebell. Start with the 18, start with the 28. I squat 360 pounds and I'm using a 28-pound kettlebell because I can still get a good contraction, I can still get a good pump out of it. It does not need to be heavy or crazy range of motion to be effective. So train smart, train hard, and let's make sure that we keep our athletic endeavors injury-free. I'll see you next week. Bye.